Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me tonight for our Homeschool 101, how to get started homeschooling in North Carolina. I know that there are a lot of families out there trying to weigh their options as we, kind of get through this really unusual time in the world, and as school districts and the state start coming out with recommendations. A lot of people who are on the fence about homeschooling are ready to dive in, and others are ready to kind of wait it out a year at home and see how things go. So welcome everybody. Whatever brings you here, I am so very happy to have you here and to connect with you tonight. And hopefully I'll be able to provide the information that you're looking for. We'll take questions at the end. So please use the chat if you have any questions. I'll be sharing a presentation from my screen, so I don't see those right away, but we'll get to them at the end. We should have plenty of time for that. And if we do run out of time, I'll be running some Facebook Lives tomorrow afternoon, Saturday morning, Sunday evening, that you can tune into and ask your questions. Sometimes as you start to digest this too, you start to, think through things and wonder what if, and, did I really understand that? And you're always welcome to reach out and ask your questions through Facebook at Triangle Homeschool Resources, or email, and I'll get all that contact information up on the slides as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen here with you. Okay, so thinking about homeschooling. Welcome. This is brought to you by the Triangle Homeschool Resource Center. In tonight's presentation, we're going to cover, is homeschooling a good fit? Is this really, what do you need to consider as you go into it, and how do you decide if it is a good fit for your family? What's that switch from public school to homeschool going to look like? What are the legal requirements to homeschool? If you register as a homeschooler in North Carolina, then, what do you need to take into account? What records do you need to keep? All that fun stuff. Some things to consider if you're thinking this is just a stopgap. So short-term homeschooling versus if you're planning for longer term. We'll talk through some of those things, things to consider. We'll talk about some of the myths and facts about homeschooling, everything you thought you knew and the things you didn't even know you didn't know. And then, what do you do after this? After, okay, yes, I've made my decision, what do you do next? And then we will take some Q&A. Okay, so hello, let me introduce myself for those of you I haven't met yet. My name is Lena, and I am the founder of the Triangle Homeschool Resource Center, co-founder of Carolina Homeschool Conference. These are, my three kiddos in the picture. We are heading into our 12th year of homeschooling. We started in Pennsylvania, 12 years ago. My son did kindergarten there, homeschooled, and it was not something that I ever saw myself doing. I loved school. I considered myself pretty successful at traditional school. We just kind of never really saw it until it became a necessity based on where we were. And so we thought, okay, we'll do it for a year. It's kindergarten. How hard could it be? And it's not, by the way. Kindergarten is a great time to kind of really embrace the homeschooling scene. And my husband's job got moved to North Carolina. So while we got our bearings here, we continued with homeschooling because it was what we knew and we weren't familiar with the schools here or the area. And by the time we settled and we had our home and, we knew we were going to stay here for a while, we were 4 years into it and we realized we loved everything about it. We just loved the homeschooling lifestyle. We loved the flexibility and the freedom. And we were really enjoying watching our kids grow and blossom. I was homeschooling 2 at that point, and then, 6 years down the road, along comes number 3. So next year I'll have a senior, a sophomore, and a preschooler. So I've got a ways to go yet, and I just love this homeschooling community. I especially love talking to new homeschoolers. I remember very clearly what that overwhelmed feeling felt like, because I kind of feel like I felt it twice. The first time when we decided to homeschool that kindergarten year until we got settled elsewhere. And then when we finally made the decision that this was going to be for us and we were looking at it more long term, it was very scary again to make that decision and feel sure of ourselves. So I remember what that feels like, and I'm here to kind of help you get through that overwhelm and to feel empowered so that you can take on this journey, or even just to make the decision whether it is or isn't right for you, with the information you need so that you can be confident moving forward in whatever you decide. So as I said, you can always reach out to me. My email address is Lena, Laina, at trianglehomeschoolresources.com. So first, let's talk about whether or not homeschooling is a good fit. How do you know if it's a good fit for your family? Certainly in the times that we're dealing with right now, it's looking more and more appealing. A lot of folks had the experience of having your kids at home for these past couple of months and watching them learn and grow. And sometimes, really struggle with the online learning platform, with the schedules, with that change in environment. And for other reasons, maybe you don't want your child going back into the classroom in the fall. Understandable. So, can homeschooling work for you? The key is really flexibility. It's managing expectations. You absolutely can homeschool. All it takes really is a willingness to be a student of homeschooling yourself. Reasonable expectations, because even if you have a background in classroom teaching at home, teaching your own child is very much different, but you love your kids and you want to see them succeed and you want to see them grow and you want to see them be happy with, what they're learning. You want to see that love of learning. And if you have all of that, you absolutely can homeschool. So, what's the difference between homeschooling and the remote learning that schools are going to do? And it really comes down to that flexibility. If you decide to homeschool, you're not beholden to a school calendar or, 1 week in school and 2 weeks at home, or at 11 o'clock having to meet with the teacher online and be in front of the computer. And oh my goodness, if you have 2, 3, 4 children and 1 or 2 computers and everybody has class at 11 or 11:30, I mean, what is a parent to do? So you kind of avoid all of that. Definitely you can still use online classes as a homeschooler. Many, many, many homeschoolers do, including our family. And sometimes that requires a certain online class time, but a lot of times it's at your student's own pace. So you gain a lot of freedom that way. They still, sit down, log into the computer, do their lessons. The videos are provided, the lectures, the information is right there. It's, not much more intense work from you, but you have the flexibility of saying you can do it at 10 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. So there's definitely more to it. When you have that flexibility, you can just make it fit your family, especially if you have multiple children and just all kinds of expectations from classroom teachers. The teachers have just really stepped up and done amazing things for our kids this past spring, but it's not going to work for everybody. And I think they understand that as much as the parents understand that. So again, reasonable expectations. Homeschooling isn't all sunshine and roses. I know that, lots of people fear, am I going to have enough patience, or my kid's not going to listen to me? It's a different paradigm from when they're listening to a classroom teacher, and you're not teaching them like a classroom teacher. You're going to teach them the way you taught them to tie their shoes or to feed themselves or get dressed. Even your teenagers, you walk beside them in the learning process. And it makes a world of difference when you set that as a reasonable expectation, and you can kind of go into this homeschooling thing with a lot more peace and a lot more probability of success. So if you do decide to homeschool, there's a transition period. COVID has kind of taken care of a lot of that for us. Certainly, kids are just at home all of a sudden. And you had this period of breaking away from that routine and that schedule, the getting on the bus every morning and packing lunches at night. And So you've had somewhat of a transition. So this transition to homeschooling, the legal definition of homeschooling, is probably going to be a little bit easier than, in ordinary times. And it is not as scary as it seems. One thing to think about is that if you do decide to officially legally homeschool, then you register your homeschool before withdrawing your child from their school, if they've already been enrolled in the public school system or a private school even. And then after that's done, you take a deep breath, you take a break, you let go of the stress. Homeschoolers call this process deschooling. You've probably already had a little bit of it, but really it's kind of just letting go of all of those expectations, of all of that connection, especially if school may have been a stressful place for your student, if there were social issues or a subject that they were struggling with in school. You want to put some distance between yourself and your students and those issues so that they don't bring it with them into the homeschool. So that's what the process of deschooling means. It means not jumping in day one into the workbooks and sitting down at a desk and making it look very much like a classroom at home from day one. For some families down the line, you're going to find that works really well for your student. They're really motivated by that, but you still kind of want to set the expectation that this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be a little more flexible, but you also have to be more self-disciplined to kind of get through this. So it's just making that transition and giving yourself time before, there's an 8 a.m. to noon schedule for your homeschool. So take some time to deschool. Now, the important part, homeschooling laws in North Carolina, and this will be specific to North Carolina. So if somehow you found out about our workshop and you're tuning in from elsewhere, certainly let me know and I will help connect you to the resources and the laws in your state. It is a state-to-state thing, that it is not a federally mandated set of rules for homeschooling. Every state determines their own. Here in North Carolina, we're really lucky. It's a very homeschool friendly state. Parents are given a lot of freedom to educate their children as they see fit. Because of that, there are a lot of homeschoolers here. There have been over 100,000 prior to yesterday's registration, and who knows how many there were, because I hear you all broke the system. But tons of homeschoolers here. That means there are tons of opportunities for things to do, for places to get enrichment, for places to connect to other homeschoolers, to get classes. What parent sits down and thinks, I can't wait to teach calculus in my homeschool? Not a lot. So somebody out there is teaching calculus. You can get your student into that. So lots of great things about homeschooling in North Carolina. It's all because, our laws are very clearly defined, very easy to follow, and it gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of latitude to do what you need to do to keep your children progressing. So the first thing to think about is when and how to register your homeschool. So I bet that is probably foremost on most people's minds this evening. If you tried to register yesterday and did not get through, the system was still down today, don't fret. You actually don't have to be registered as a homeschool until the exact point you're ready to withdraw them from the school that they were previously registered in. And that doesn't have to be done until they're expected to report there. Okay, so you have some time, and there's going to be plenty of time for everybody who needs to register before the beginning of the school year. And there's even a little bit of wiggle room there. So when do you register? How do you register? So number one is when. If you have a student who is age 7 or older and you're going to start homeschooling, you need to file a notice of intent through the Division of Non-Public Education. Okay, so I do have a link for this, and I will email everybody some actual clickable links. It doesn't make sense to put them on the slides because you can't click them. So the Division of Non-Public Education is where you're going to go and file your notice of intent. You set up an account, you give them your address, you name your homeschool. It's kind of important. Um, and you need proof of at least a high school diploma or equivalent. So your high school diploma, if you are the primary teacher in your homeschool, or your high school transcript. College credentials work as well, or community college credentials, because then of course you would have had to graduate from high school in order to take that step. So they work just as well if you don't have your high school diploma on hand, but your college diploma is hanging on the wall. That's something you can take a picture of and send in. So that's how you register, and everything else centers around their age and when they're expected to report to school. So if you're not 100% sure yet that you want to homeschool and you're still kind of waiting to see what the schools are going to do, don't open a homeschool yet, because then you need to close it before your students go into school. They can't be enrolled in 2 schools at the same time in North Carolina. So if they're enrolled in your homeschool, and you can only open a homeschool if you have a student to enroll in it, then you should be withdrawing them from the public school or other private school as soon as possible, as soon as you get that acceptance of your open homeschool. Okay, so I know there are probably a lot of specific questions about that, but we'll definitely get to those at the end. But otherwise, if you have a student age 7 or above, then you're going to need to register. If they're turning 7 this coming school year, sometime during the school year, you don't have to register until about a month before their 7th birthday. So you can give yourself some extra time. And anybody under 7, so that includes those students turning 7 this school year. And if you have a kindergartner or someone going into kindergarten who's 5, 6, in 1st grade, you don't need to register a homeschool yet. Compulsory age for education in North Carolina is 7. So prior to that, you don't need to transfer them out of school into a homeschool. So you would just go to the school and say, I'm withdrawing my student. They're not compulsory age yet. Therefore, I don't need to show proof of transfer. So, hopefully the school administrator or the secretary or whoever is taking that information will understand that. And if not, then you can ask them to take a look at the Division of Non-Public Education, because it's pretty clear right there in black and white. So that's registration. You register once. You register one homeschool for your household. So if you have multiple students, you're only registering one homeschool and you're enrolling your multiple students in that. Next year, you can decide to continue to homeschool. You can go on to your portal and the Division of Non-Public Education, update their ages. Make sure you keep your address there current. Update their ages, but you don't have to file again. It's simply providing updates when you see fit. So you only register once. And then when you're done homeschooling, so your children either go back into brick and mortar school here in North Carolina, or you move out of state, or what have you, or they graduate from your homeschool, then you have to close your homeschool with the Division of Non-Public Education. And that is as simple as going back into that portal and saying, I'm closing my homeschool. So those are the rules around notice of intent, opening and closing your homeschool. The other thing we have to do as homeschoolers is standardized testing annually. So standardized testing is not your EOGs. There are a list of tests on DNPE's website that kind of meet this requirement. They can be done at home by you. They can be done by a proctor in a group setting. They can be done one-on-one. Certain tests require a certified tester, and your child would take that test one-on-one with that tester. There's a wide variety. They can be done online. They can be done bubble sheet, the old books and bubble sheets, the way we did them in school. So lots of options. It needs to be done once before the first anniversary of your homeschool registration, and then once per school year after that. So I get a lot of questions about what happens if, my student doesn't do well on their standardized test. Then you know what you have to work on next. And that's all that matters. They don't need to be turned into anybody. No one needs to see those scores but you. So use them for what they mean to you. And if it tells you that you need to work on spelling, if it tells you, maybe your student needs more work on their times tables, then use that going forward, but don't to gauge your success or failure based on a standardized test. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help your student. For the most part, the standardized tests out there are somewhat outdated, and they're not really well normed to grade standards these days. So sometimes it helps to see where students are struggling or where they really excel, and where you can really kind of help them bloom. But otherwise, it's just a box you check. It only takes a couple of days out of your school year, and it costs anywhere from $20 to $100, depending on the test you choose. So lots of options. Definitely does not have to be something to stress about, which is, take away one thing from this, then just know that you don't have to stress about that standardized testing. Cross that bridge when you come to it, and we'll get there. What other records do you need to keep? As a homeschooler, you're required to keep attendance in your homeschool, and attendance for 180 days, 5 hours a day. No, those are recommendations. You are required to do school 9 months out of the year on a regular schedule, excluding reasonable breaks and holidays. So pick your 9 months that you want to work in. You can keep a year-round schedule, you can keep a traditional schedule, whatever works for you. And you just keep attendance the days you are doing school, and whatever that looks like for your family. You put a tick mark on a sheet or on a calendar, and you've kept attendance. You're required to keep vaccination records in the home office of the school, so that would be in your home. So it's either a record of vaccinations from the doctor's office or a letter of exemption, and you are required to keep proof of that standardized testing for 1 year after you've done the test. And that's it. Those are the only records you are required to keep. You don't have to give report cards. You don't have to calculate GPA. You don't have to keep a transcript. All that comes down the pike when you're planning for college. But to get yourself started, don't worry about any of those things. Just know what you have to keep. And it's as simple as the attendance, the vaccination records, and the standardized test record, which you won't have until after your first year anyway. And that is legal homeschooling in North Carolina in a nutshell. Everything else is up to you. What you teach and when, how many subjects, in what order, it's all up to you. And I feel like I just missed a whole bunch of slides. Okay, no. So the myths and facts around homeschooling, I think I got a little out of order from my original slide. But what you thought you knew and what you didn't even know you didn't know. A myth of homeschooling is you need an accredited program. Accreditation does not mean a whole lot in the homeschool world. It used to be that graduating from high school, when homeschooling was really new and not every state recognized homeschooling, that colleges, the military, career schools, vocational schools tended to want a diploma from an accredited institution. And that's where this idea of having an accredited curriculum and that kind of stuff kind of came from. But curriculum itself can't be accredited. A school can be accredited. So if you see somebody touting that we have an accredited English program, I would ask a lot of questions before you invest in it. Because it doesn't really mean a whole lot. As a homeschooler, a lot of the curriculum out there falls in line with what your children will be learning in school. So there's not a whole lot of need. School, if you go to put your children back into public school, if they ask for accreditation of what you used, then you would need to politely inform them or educate them that doesn't matter in North Carolina, that there is no standards for accreditation of homeschools. So just something to be aware of, and don't stress yourself out about trying to find the perfect accredited program, because it's not really going to be that much different. The myth, you need to put your student back into high school so that they can get into college. Colleges accept homeschool diplomas these days, and many actually actively recruit homeschool graduates because, they find differences in the way these students learn. And they've just found that having that more well-rounded, diverse student body is good for the university or college. So, homeschool diplomas are much more common now than they were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So college recruiters are familiar with it. They're familiar with homeschool transcripts, and it's definitely not an issue to get your homeschooled student into college if that's where they want to go. The myth that homeschoolers are isolated. Well, we're all a little bit isolated right now, right? But under normal circumstances, most homeschoolers are out and about more than they're actually home. Sometimes it can be a challenge to discipline ourselves to stay home and kind of do the work we want to do at home and not take advantage of all the classes and all the socials and all the field trips. But that makes a great, well-rounded homeschool too. So certainly under normal circumstances, there are so many groups you can get involved in, so many classes your students can take. The opportunities for field trips in North Carolina and surrounding states, just a little short road trip is just phenomenal. And the opportunity for, hands-on learning and getting in the moment and really getting in there is just fantastic. So your children won't be isolated. There will be other students when it's safe for them to get together with, and certainly support for you as well. So lots of good stuff. And if there's anything else that maybe you've thought about homeschooling and that kind of maybe scares you away from it, definitely mention it in the chat and we'll address it at the end. So it's time to think about, are we homeschooling short-term or long-term? And it does get a little tricky here. It was easier in prior years to kind of give advice as to what to think about in terms of putting your kids back into school. Obviously, this is just going to be a situation that our schools have not dealt with previously, so it's going to be new for everybody. Prior to COVID, would have said that if you're homeschooling short term, it's a good thing to do and it's going to be short term, it's a good thing to do to have a conversation with the school administrators, with the principal, and say, what are you going to look for when I bring my child back to re-enroll them in school? A lot of principals might want to do a placement test to say, are they really ready for the grade that you say they're ready for? If they don't do well on the test, oftentimes it's just a case of a little bit of remediation in a particular subject area rather than necessarily holding them back and making them repeat a grade that you said that they completed. Now, schools this year are facing, I'm sure, a lot of parents thinking, I'll homeschool through fall and then we'll go back in the spring. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a state official, but I will pass on that something we've always known as homeschoolers is kind of day 10 into your school year is what your school says their enrollment is. That's when they count the number of students that are enrolled and they say, okay, this is our enrollment. They set their budget based on the number of students. So if your student isn't there then, and then plans to go back in January, and there's a influx, a flood of people going back in January, nobody really knows what those numbers are going to be like. Nobody knows what that budget's going to be like. So it's just something to keep in mind. And, you need to do what's best for your family. So just there may be a little bit of resistance there. There may be some conditions that we have not yet seen. Just something to consider. But short term, a lot of parents certainly are worried about keeping their kids on track so that they can kind of slide right back in. It's hard to say what that's going to look like. And one of the things you can do is that because the public schools in North Carolina do publish their curriculums and teachers publish what they're doing publicly, that, following along, but doing it at your own student's pace with your own materials is certainly, a plausible solution to this upcoming semester. So that's something you might want to think about doing. And you can kind of supplement, follow along at home, do the instruction for your kids and do it that way, and hope it makes an easy transition. And then, otherwise just realize that every student has gaps, that no student gets through a grade level and remembers everything to go on to their next grade level. And teachers understand that. So that's just, a part of life. Depending on where you are in the state, if you're in one of the larger metro areas, the population is transient, people are moving in, people are moving out all the time. Somebody comes from another state, teacher doesn't know, what they know or what they don't know and where the gaps are. So they're teaching to everybody as if it's new in a lot of cases anyway. So, don't fret about gaps. Really, you just want to keep your student moving forward and making forward progress, practicing the skills that, make them successful in school, reading, writing, and mathematics, and everything else will fall into place. And, so as a short-term plan, it's really not much more stressful. If you're thinking long-term, you certainly can breathe easier. You have a lot more flexibility. So if you know that you're going to be at this for at least a couple of years to see if it's working, then try something fun, dive into your children's interests. And even if you're doing it short term, take advantage of the extra time you found in your day, not commuting to and from, not spending an hour on the bus in the morning and the afternoon, and let your child explore, what lights them up and rediscover that love of learning, or keep it going. If they really loved school, and they're going to be missing it, you can certainly keep stoking that fire at home. And there's lots of support out there to help you do that. So those are the things to consider in terms of short term versus planning for this long term. It's certainly a new world in terms of short term homeschooling, and it's hard to give you advice, certainly, but it may warrant having a conversation with a school administrator if you are able, and just ask, what they think. I think in some cases they'll be breathing a sigh of relief to know that they won't be as overcrowded as they're worried about being. So, it might help everybody in the long run. So just consider those things, and certainly ask around, ask other families that have done it, come in and out of school. Lots of families kind of do homeschooling for a while, then go back into school for a while, and maybe come back to homeschooling and back and forth. It happens. So there's lots of experiences out there, and the community is certainly willing to kind of lend their experience and let you know what they have found. So we shall see. So if you decided to homeschool, or you're still not sure, but it feels very overwhelming, don't take it on alone. Number one piece of advice I can give you is to get support for this journey, whether it is short term or longer term. Definitely make sure that you are supported, that you have somebody you're connected to, that you can ask for advice moving forward. Because if you're taken care of, if your questions are answered, it's going to go more smoothly for your children. So you be prepared, and then everything else will be fine. So one of the ways that you can kind of continue down this journey is if you have decided to homeschool and you're ready to plan your homeschool year, and you don't know what that's going to look like. What's curriculum look like? How do we set up a daily schedule? We have a workshop coming up called the Plan Your Homeschool Year Workshop, and it begins July 27th. The interactive sessions will begin July 27th, but if you are feeling like you want to get started and start ordering curriculum and everything before that, I'll certainly get you the information that you need to do that ahead of that date. But we'll start having regular calls July 27th. What does this workshop look like? I'll help you set meaningful, measurable, achievable goals for your homeschooling journey. So whether it's, I need to get through a semester and stay on track, we'll set your goals and make sure that we set up your curriculum to do that. Learn about the homeschooling styles, especially if you're in this for a little bit for the longer term. You want to find the right style or the right mix of styles for your family. You want to find a curriculum that works for you instead of you working for curriculum. And I can attest to wasting time and money on curriculum, because I have shelves and shelves full of books the advantage to you is that I am happy for you to have you come and look at anything that you want to preview or look over before you spend your own money, but we'll help you narrow it down so that you're not, buying curriculum and then realizing it's not going to work. And then we can break down that curriculum and make lesson plans so that you know what you're doing week to week, day to day. Manage that daily and weekly schedule so that you can be sure you are headed toward those goals that you want, to achieve as a homeschooling family. There's a lot of challenges in homeschooling that certainly we can't address in a 30-minute, 40-minute webinar, but things like, how do you homeschool multiple ages? So with high schoolers and a preschooler, I certainly know a little bit about juggling multiple ages, but also, I have advice from lots of veteran homeschool parents to share with you about how that actually gets done. A lot of you are in the situation where you're working while trying to homeschool, and what does that look like? How in the world do you manage all of that, keep your kids busy and on task while you're in a meeting? We'll work on that too. And what about kids that just, I'm not going to do this for you. Kids that resist, they all do it. I'll just tell you all right up front, they're all going to hit a point where they're going to be like, nope, not doing that. Everybody hits it and we all get through it. So, we'll make a plan for that and some advice for that. And it helps so much to have a community of parents on the same journey as you, right? Or all in the same boat, all starting at the same time. You have instant connection, instant community for you to go to for support. Maybe you'll even find somebody local for your kids to connect with. It's just kind of a great place to be. And then beyond that, we'll get it, find out about co-ops and support groups, other kinds of enrichments that you can take advantage of as a homeschooler, and anything else that comes up as we go on. Now, typically, I've been doing this one-on-one for families for years. The package is $650 to have a one-on-one session and plan for your homeschool. As a group session, it's $175. But COVID, right? I know that we're all just in this crazy, this crazy situation. Nobody knows what's coming next. And I didn't want this to be a barrier to any family who, really wants a good jump start on their homeschool and wants to feel confident. And I want you all to be successful at this because I know you can be. So this workshop is actually Name Your Price. So you get to set the price. What does it mean to you? What do you want to put into it? And what is it worth to you as a family? So again, that is trianglehomeschoolresources.com/plan-your-year. And I'll certainly send you a link in the email. You can think it over, send me any questions you have about it, but I would love to have you in the workshop. We're just finishing up one now. We did with the first round of folks who kind of made that decision earlier in the spring, and it was wonderful. It was so much fun. We really enjoyed the calls. So I hope you'll join us for the next one starting at the end of July. So I will hop on over to the chat and we'll take questions for a few minutes. But after this, if you can't stick around, you can always find me on Facebook at Triangle Homeschool Resources, my email address, or the website, trianglehomeschoolresources.com. You can make an appointment for a one-on-one right from the Facebook page, and you're all welcome to, a free consultation there and just send some questions. So thank you everybody so much for joining me. Like I said, I'm gonna hop on over, stop sharing my screen, and I will stop the recording now for those of you catching the recording. So if you have questions after the recording, then go ahead and drop me an email and I would be happy to answer that for you. So thank you for joining me for the live presentation, and I look forward to your questions and getting to know you in your homeschool journey.